Hey there, my Zoomers. Welcome back to another Strategy Basics. It's been a long time since I've done one of these, so I thought I'd jump in with some true basics of the basics. There was that free weekend and a big sale, so it might have brought a whole lot of players to Warhammer and Warhammer 2, so I thought I'd go over the most basics of the basic. Now, this video is going to go over the controls and user interface for the campaign map. I was going to do it as the campaign map and the battle map, but then I ended up writing notes, and I have like 4,000 words, and I haven't even written the part for the battle yet. So we're going to split this into two parts. This is going to focus on the campaign, and the next video will focus on the battle map. So let's just get straight into this. Starting off with the most basic of all basic things, movement. Now, as with most games, getting around, it's WASD, so W up, ASD, you know, round and round. You can also press Q and E to rotate the view. So it's left click to select, and then it's right click to move them around and select things. Our SH hasn't got any move range, but you can see there, I can queue up that movement order, or I can queue up to go attack this army. So right click is interact and move. You can also middle click and drag around to get around the map. This is something that I personally prefer to do, just because it's a lot faster and has a lot more fine control than WASD, but it is again down to personal preference if that's what you want to do. So now we're going to go over the screen part by part, divide it up into different sections, what they mean, and I'm going to go over this in general terms, so there might be specific things that you see in this campaign that I don't cover, and that's because they're not things in every single campaign. I'm going to be trying to get things that appear in all the campaigns and then go into the specific details in the campaign videos, which you can see in the card. So this bottom section in the middle, this is going to be either the army or the settlement panel, depending on what you have selected. So we're going to start off with settlement. Now, of course, it's only visible if you have a settlement selected. If you don't, there'll be nothing, and then you click on it, and there it appears. So at the top here, we have the province name, and if we click on it, it'll center our view on the province. You can use these arrows to go around all our provinces that we own settlements in. So the overview, which is this button here, it allows you to build buildings, upgrade buildings, and also demolish buildings. So if you just hover over a building, you can click the demolish icon. It won't give you all the money back, but it will give you some, and it will happen over the next turn. So don't be surprised when you don't see it immediately. You'll see it in the next turn. One thing to note is when you are building from here, it does put it into this sort of tree format, which can be very confusing if you're playing on a small screen, or if you're new to the series, it can be very confusing as to what all these different things mean, but we'll come back to that later when we get to the building browser. Another thing you can see in the overview is that this little icon here, it means that that settlement has walls. So if we go to the Shrine of Azurin, we can see that this building here is giving it walls, which we can see in the tooltip on the left. And this icon here shows us that we have walls and that they are at 100% strength. If they are damaged, it'll appear yellow and then red as the damage gets more and more severe. Now this settlement here, the Tower of Lyzine, it hasn't got all the way to having walls yet, so we can see the icon is missing. This basically means is if an enemy attacks, they can just attack the settlement and the army will have to fight in the field rather than being inside of a city with walls to defend them. And next icon down here is the garrison details. This will basically show you what units are defending that city when there is no army garrisoned. So if you have an army sat in this settlement, they will also defend it, but when you have nothing else, this is all you have, and you can see it down here, the types of units, the health, the stats, all that fun stuff. I'm fairly sure that garrisons can never level up, so they will always be this strong no matter what happens, unless you upgrade the units via research and so on. Next up is one of my favourite tabs, it's the building browser. It's something that is incredibly useful to new players because it separates all the buildings into their individual areas and makes it a lot easier to understand. So the blue here, that's ports. It will just be port buildings. Some cities, like Lorthan, have a special port that is pink, but is in the blue section. Now, this is a unique port, but all the other ports in the game, they pretty much function the exact same, no matter what faction you're playing as. So yes, ports are only going to really give you growth and income among some other things depending on the faction. Now our next one is landmarks, and this is this pink column here. Now these are buildings that can only be built in certain places, and what you will see is if we zoom in here, this little monument symbol, it means it's a strategic location and it provides a unique building chain. Now the building chain may not be available to all factions, but the faction that does get it will be able to build this pink building here, and they will only be able to build one of them, and so you should always pretty much build it, because it'll just get you some great effects that you can't get anywhere else. Next we have red, which is basic military. This is going to have in most of your base units. They certainly won't be your best units, but it will get you up into the mid tier quite easily. These buildings will be quite cheap and not that expensive to upgrade until you get to the very top tiers, and they will just allow you to recruit better and better units up to about the mid-range. Purple, we have advanced military. Now this will be where your more elite or more technologically advanced units come from. Things like advanced artillery, much better gunner units, some forms of cavalry, monsters, constructs, many things like that. They will be in the advanced tab, and this will generally be where the very elite of your armies will be coming from. Yellow, we have defense. Now this will upgrade your garrison, and on minor settlements it will allow you to have walls on them. So once you get to the max size garrison on a minor settlement, it will give you walls, which will of course make the settlement much harder to attack for armies because they will need to take time to besiege it and build towers and all this stuff. It's very useful to have. You can also build buildings such as lighthouses or tunnels that will make it a lot easier to detect escaping undercities. If you want to know what cities are and how they work, then I have a Skaven guide, which is linked in the card, so you can check that out and learn all about those. Finally, we come to green, which is infrastructure. Now, this will basically be everything to do with the province itself. So it's public order, income, and normally corruption. Now, depending on what faction you're playing as, they may like vampiric corruption, chaos corruption, Skaven corruption, or no corruption whatsoever. You can pretty much be guaranteed that at least one building in infrastructure will do something to increase your personal level of corruption and decrease other levels of corruption.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
You there, are you a part of the 11%? 11% of what? The 11% of people subscribed, of course. You're not? Or what are you waiting for? The button's right there. Subscribing will ensure you never miss a video, and has been proven to increase your epic gamer skill by at least 1%. If you're feeling particularly adventurous, you could also like the video to be in with a chance of winning eternal happiness. So go ahead and subscribe, and join the 11% today. We now return you to your regular scheduled programming.
Now, our next tab along the bottom here is Recruit Lords, and this obviously allows us to recruit Lords, which we can give armies to. As we scroll down here, we can see that it shows us their cost, so how much upfront it will cost us, their upkeep, which is how much we'll have to pay per turn to keep the Lord running for us, and their traits. So these are just unique traits that every single Lord gets in the game when you recruit them. It's always worth having a read and seeing which ones are going to work best for you. At the top here, we can see we have a couple of Lords that we already have recruited, so if you recruit with these, there won't be any upfront cost. They already are a bit leveled up, and you know you've been using them a while, so you can pretty much be guaranteed that they're pretty decent. Our final icon here is the recruit hero, and of course there are many different types of heroes, but they can be summed up as such. Assassins can assassinate characters and should be doing so as much as possible. If a hero has the assassinate ability, 9 times out of 10 they will be on my campaign map unless there are no heroes for them to attack whatsoever. But they should always be going around attacking enemy heroes, as they will just do the same to you, and it will make your battles so much easier when the enemy can't run hero spam. Next we have mages, which are almost always in my armies. I pretty much never send them around the campaign map unless you play in a faction that has something that makes them useful on the campaign map specifically, but for the most part they should be in your armies. Finally, each faction normally has a special hero. This is just something that's unique to them and provides some unique bonuses. For the Vampire Coast here, we have Gunnery Wives, which a very useful unit for having inside your armies to give training and many buffs to the missile units. But pretty much every single faction has a unit that is like this, that is unique and provides some interesting bonuses. You should always read into it or watch one of my guides, as they will kind of take you through those in the Lords and Heroes sections. So when you have a settlement selected, on the left here we have the essential information, and I'm going to go through this bit by bit so you understand what every single piece means. So at the top we have growth. It shows us how close we are to getting our next population surplus point, how much growth we're getting per turn, and then how many turns until we get our next point. Population surplus can be used to upgrade the size of settlements. So if we hover over this, we can see that to upgrade it to level 3, it would cost 2 population surplus, but we only have 1, so we can't do that just yet. The tax province toggle toggles whether we are getting any money from this settlement or not. So if I toggle that off, there we are, we lost 2 grand from our total income. If I toggle that back on, there we are, 2 grand back. We can see here how much income we are getting per turn from this settlement in particular. If we hover over this, we can see if it's getting affected by any rights or commandments or anything like that. So when you turn off taxing for a province, it gets rid of the -4 to public order that every single province in the game suffers from taxing. And so this should only really be used when your provinces are really suffering with public order and you can afford to lose out on the money. Right below we have public order, and this is basically how happy the province is. It is affected by many things: corruption, types of buildings, taxation, as I just mentioned, so many things. But what you basically need to know is the higher the better. If it's green and it's getting +20, that's just fantastic. If it's red, if you get to -100, you'll have a rebellion, which will raid the province and then eventually attack the settlement that they came from, which is obviously not very good for you, so you want to make sure that you either take out the rebellion or make sure the public order doesn't get that low. I'm going to take these off because I'm not listening to anything. The corruption tab here shows you the breakdown of the corruption in the area. So there are many types of corruption in the game. There is Untainted, Chaos, Vampiric, and Skaven. Depending on what faction you're playing as, you want to get more or less of these corruptions. Since we're playing as the Vampire Coast, well, lots of Vampiric corruption, so we can see here that we've got 72.7%, and the change per turn is going up, while the change for Untainted is going down. A basic rule of thumb is, whatever corruption you are wanting to get, the more you have of that, the better, and the less you have of the others, the better. At the bottom here, we have province effects. Now, this is everything that is affecting this province in particular. These can also be faction-wide effects, but it will just be shown here what is specifically affecting this province. So for some of the Game 2 races, the higher the public order is, the better vision you have in the area. So as you can see here, we don't have good public order, so I'm not getting much vision. So you can get other things like commandments, corruption, and any events that are happening in the game in general. So when you get the chaos corruption at the end of the game, that'll appear here and just show you what's happening in this province in particular. It might be different for every province, or it might be exactly the same. Now the last thing here we have is a commandment tab. Commandments can only be applied on provinces which you completely own. They can't be applied on any contested provinces. You need to own all the settlements inside of them. They do different things depending on what faction you're playing, but you're generally always going to have one that gets you more money, better recruitment, cheaper buildings, and public order bonuses. But of course, depending on what faction you're playing, you should read all about these and just pick the one that's working best for you. Alternatively, watch my video, because I've done many videos on different commandments of all the different factions. They get covered in the campaign guides of the videos, so if you want to know more about those, then do watch that. I also did a video on province management, which will help you with many things, including commandments, so be sure to watch that if you have not already. Moving away from settlements, we now have the army view, and very similar to settlements, at the top here we can see we have the name of the army, and if we click on that, it will zoom our view to the said army, and if we click on these arrows here, it will move us between the different lords and heroes in our faction. So just go around different heroes, different lords, all very useful. So in the middle center of the screen here, we see all the units in the army. That includes any heroes, and of course the lord who is in charge. If we click on a unit, it will show us their stats on the left hand side here, and it's always worth having a little read of these, see what they're best at. Just really familiarize yourself with the units and what the different effects actually mean, so that you can be getting the most out of them in your fights. When we hover over a selected unit, we can do several things. So we can click this quill icon here to rename them. This is purely for fun. As far as I know, there are no effects that can come from naming a unit, anything in particular, but if you know something, then leave a comment down below. I would love to know about that. If we have 2 or more units selected, we can click this icon here, which means merge, and what that's basically going to do is you see those 2 units are damaged. If we click that, one of the units will get put to full health, while the other sacrifices the health that got them there. So it's basically a quick way to just heal up a single unit, but it damages one of your units as well, so it's kind of a dice roll of, do I want to have more damaged units, or do I want to have fewer units that are at full health? It's kind of a weird system like that, but when you get your head around it, it is quite simple. The final icon that you can click when you have a unit selected is the disband button. What this will basically do is just get rid of that unit. It won't refund you anything, it will just get rid of it and open up a slot in the army. I would only recommend doing this if you have lots of money to throw at replacing that unit, or if you are severely running out of money and you need to cut down on costs. Otherwise, I just say keep the units until they die and then replace them with something better if you don't really have the money flowing out of your ears to do it. You can also disband the Lord, but you have to have every single unit removed from the army. And what this will do, this won't completely get rid of the Lord, it'll just send him straight back to your recruitment pool, so that you can recruit him a bit later on, as I showed earlier. Have just had to quickly load up a different save file because global recruitment doesn't quite work the same for the Vampire Coast as it does for everyone else. I might jump around a few campaigns over the course of this just so I can show you relevant examples. But for the most part, these things apply to the majority of your standard factions. Now, if we go to our army again and we click this flag and plus icon that's at the bottom here, we enter the recruitment screen. At the bottom here, we can see local and global, and this can be very confusing to new players because they don't understand the difference, they don't understand what each one does and why one's more expensive than the other, and don't worry, I'm going to explain it all. So local allows you to recruit units from buildings that are in the local region. Look at this region here, we don't have any military buildings, no red buildings whatsoever, so the only units you can recruit are the ones you can recruit without the need for any military buildings. If we go to global, it gives us access to all units that we have unlocked anywhere in the entire game. Okay, quickly, before I forget, you need to be in a settlement or encamped in friendly territory to be able to access both global and local recruitment. But yes, we could be the opposite side of the map and we could recruit these units, but as you can see, they are much more expensive and they take a very long time to get recruited. The further away you are from where you're recruiting these from, it takes a bit longer and it costs a hell of a lot more money. So global recruitment should only be used with certain factions, or you just have lots of money and time to throw at the problem. But yes, that is the difference. One is the buildings you have locally, and one is buildings you have everywhere. So if you go back to the main army screen here, and then we click this icon that's got the flag and the chevron, we open the Regiments of Renown menu. Now, Regiments of Renown, for the most part, are unlocked via leveling up your faction leader. So my faction leader is Krotgar. Once he gets to level 10, I can unlock this one, then level 13, 16, 18, 20, etc, etc. You unlock the rest of them. Some units can appear in this. These units, like the Queen Bess and the Casket of Souls from the Vampire Coast and the Tomb Kings, you unlock those by using a right, and when you use that right, they appear in the Regiments of Renown recruitment, and you can just recruit them instantly. That's a good thing about Regiments of Renown, you can recruit them the same turn. If I had these unlocked, I could click on them, and then click recruit, and then they would instantly be in my army. I wouldn't have to wait till next turn to recruit them, I wouldn't have to wait for anything, just have to pay for them, and then they're in my army right now. This also works, I could get to the tip of my movement range, and then I could just still recruit them, as long as I was in friendly territory or in a settlement. This cog icon here, this basically toggles movement notifications for this army. So if this army moves, say I send this army to move all the way up here, and I click this, what will basically happen is every single time it moves, I will get a notification, tell me, okay, this is moved, this is where they've gone. It's not really something that you need to do, so I generally leave it off for the most part. We're back with the Vampire Coast here, and we're going to be going over this little section on the left here. So as you can see here, when we have an army selected, on the left hand side we see their portrait and a bunch of other stuff surrounding it, but don't worry, we're going to go over all of it. So this yellow bar here, it is his movement range, and if I hold right click and drag around, I can see how much of each movement this is going to leave me with. So if I move all the way out here, I'll have 36% left. If I only moved here, I'll have 57% left. It's very, very simple like that. It's just how far you can move. It isn't a linear thing. It's not like just I can move this distance every single time. That'll be my max. Sometimes I might only be able to move a fraction of it, especially going up these gates to get over here. To get to this gate would take basically all of my movement range as much as getting all the way out here. So it varies depending on the terrain you're going over, if you're in water, if you're embarking, disembarking, many things like that. But you can always tell by holding right click and checking. These 5 squares here that are next to Lord, these show any items that they have equipped. So they can equip weapons, armor, enchanted items, casting items, and a talisman. This larger circle here, this shows the mount that they have. If this circle doesn't appear, it just means they don't have any mount. So we can see this guy here has a Rotting Promethean. This small blue icon here, this shows the effects of any heroes that are in the army. So as you can see here, because we have a Gunnery White, this army is getting 55 experience per turn. Depending on what hero you have, again, this can do many different things for your army, but it will always show up here, so be sure to have a read if you're not sure. This green shield-shaped icon at the bottom here, this shows your movement stance. Now, each faction can have a unique movement stance. For example, these guys here, they have the dig for treasure stance. But for the most part, I'm going to go over the ones that basically every faction has access to. So no movement stance is just nothing. You can move around, you can engage battles, you won't affect any public order by being there or not being there, other than what your character or lord already does. It's pretty much a standard movement stance that you'll be using for the entire game. If we go into Forced March, it will give us a 50% bonus to our move range, but it will stop us from being able to recruit, being able to engage battles, and if we enter a battle, we will all our units be tired, and if we lose that battle, we will lose the entire army. You can't retreat, every single thing will die. So you have to use this when you're moving a long distance, where you're either sure that if you get attacked, you can win it, or you are sure that you won't get attacked, and you'll just be totally fine. So use this at your own risk. What I'd recommend doing if you want to use Forced March, I'd go to a 0 stance, go to the max range you can, scout out, see if there's any enemies, and if there isn't, then go into Forced March and go that extra distance. Now, raiding requires that you have 50% of your move range available, and it will consume all this to establish a raiding camp. A raiding camp gets you income. It also severely affects the local owners' public order and growth, so don't do it in your own factions. It will take away all of your income and make your faction provinces very unhappy with you, because why would you raid your own place? Going into raiding stance also gets rid of any attrition, so if you are in a, say, Vampiric Wasteland and you're playing as the Empire, then go into a raiding stance and it'll protect you from getting any corruption. This does come at the cost of, if you are in a battle, all of your units will start as winded, but even if you lose that battle, you'll just lose the units that you lost, you won't lose the entire army, so, you know, it's a little bit safer than marching, but it's still not totally safe because your army will be a bit weaker. The encamp stance is really good for when you need to do some recruitment, but you haven't got a building that you can just walk into. You just hit the encamp button and boom, there you are. I can now recruit from my local and global recruitment, and I can also get replenishment for my army. So as you can see here, I'm in non-friendly territory, I'm encamped, I can globally recruit. Just ignore the local, that's a Vampire Coast thing, just pretend that isn't there. And I'm also getting replenishment, whereas if I just go into no movement stance, I'm not getting any replenishment. So it's good for when you are quite far away from your own lands and you need to heal up a little bit. It also gives you immunity to attrition, a +5 bonus to leadership and melee defense, so it makes your army generate health rather than gradually losing it to attrition, as well as giving it a bonus if it does happen to get attacked. But this all does come at the cost of you not being able to move. So again, it's kind of a trade-off. The ambush stance is a bit of a weird one. It allows you to stand still in a position, and if an enemy walks over you with their army, you are given the option to ambush them, and ambushing them just gives you a massive advantage because they can't get any reinforcements in, and they get surrounded on all sides. They don't get to deploy, so their artillery is all way out of position. You can instantly kill it. It's very, very, very useful if you can pull it off. I don't think I've managed to get a successful ambush playing as anyone except the Skaven, and only because they can just do it on the move. All of the factions, you have to get into position, hit the stance, and then you just sit in it and then pray that an enemy army just walks over you. But again, it can be useful. Just need to hop over to the Tomb Kings because the Vampire Coast, they don't have the option that I was about to talk about next. Last one that I'm going to go over that is quite common is channeling. What this basically allows you to do is just get a bit more magic upon entering battles. This is a good one that I like to do when I have one army besieging a settlement. I place another army to back them up, and I put them in channeling just to up the magic of the battle a little bit. That's pretty much all it does. Some factions, it kind of tends to replace the encamp stance and lets you get replenishment and global recruitment, but for the most part just gets you a bit more magic, which is always useful. Next we have this spiky circular icon with a number in it. This is your lord's level, and the blue going around the outside, that is how close you are to leveling up this lord. The blue is obviously the progress, and if you look behind the colour, we can see the breakdown of what skills we have in this character as sort of a pie chart. So we can see we have 10 character skills, 13 battle skills, and 4 campaign skills, and we can kind of see that behind the number as a coloured pie chart. Clicking on this, we go to the skills menu. On the kind of center right hand side of the screen here, we see all of our skills. If you want to unlock one, you simply have to click on it, and you need to have a skill point available. Obviously, you can check if you have a skill point available by looking in the top right here. As you can see, we don't have any available. On the left hand side, we can see our character stats again. We can also see all their battle and campaign effects that they have. Now this of course varies from each lord in the game, both legendary and non-legendary, so it's always worth having a little read to see what your character is good at, and, you know, maybe what type of units they should be bringing, because, you know, Kalita here, she has a lot of bonuses for Nehekara warriors, tomb guards, so it might be worth throwing a load of those in her army. Our final icon over here is this blue face with the magnifying glass. This is character details. This menu is also accessible from the skill screen by clicking details just like that, gets you to the exact same place. This menu at the top here, it allows you to equip different items on your lord, as well as showing you what they currently have equipped. So you just click the drop downs, click the item that you want, and it replaces it within the next turn. So for this turn, they will have this item, but in the next turn, we'll have whatever you have selected next. On the bottom here, we have info. It just tells you what type of character it is and where exactly they are located. It's as simple as that. In the middle, we have traits. Now, traits, every single lord has one, and they pick up different ones either by sitting in settlements, sitting in enemy territory, defeating certain lords. You can get traits from many different sources. There would be way too many to list, so just be sure to have a read of them, just check what they are, and check how you get each one. Finally, on the right, we have followers and banners. And followers and banners are just things you can equip to the army that you can either use to upgrade certain units, upgrade a single unit. So this banner here, it can be assigned to a single unit, and it gives it regeneration. They can, again, give many different effects, and it can vary depending on the faction, the lord. Literally, there's way too many to go over. So just be sure to have a read of them and equip the ones that work best for you and your army. One final thing to know, on the bottom right here, we have these 3 blue buttons. The feather, or the quill, that's renaming. Again, that's just for fun as far as I know. There are no names that if you put them in, something special will happen. If you know something about that, please leave a comment and I will be sure to check it out. This middle one here is records. This just shows you every single thing that this lord or hero has done for you over the course of the campaign. This guy clearly hasn't done too much, it's not very eventful, so there's only one. But if I go to Kalita, we can see she's done she's done quite a bit. So it just lets you see the whole history of the lord. This isn't really useful for anything other than interest, I guess, or if you are trying to reload an old save and find out where you did a certain thing. And our final thing that we have is replace lord. So if I click this, I can pick from my pool of lords, both already recruited and new to be recruited, and I can swap out this lord for that one. The lord that you get rid of, so if I got rid of Kalita here, she would still be in the faction, but she'd only be re-recruitable after a couple of turns. I couldn't just swap her in and out every single turn. There is, it's the wound cooldown, but she isn't wounded, she's just, you know, starting her life out and coming back. Now on the top left here, we have admin stuff, so we have the escape menu, which of course we can also access by pressing escape. Next up we have the chat, so you can chat with all of your good friends online. I personally say I have literally never used this in my entire life, so I'm not exactly sure who you're chatting to, but you certainly chat to someone. This one here is the advisor. That's that bald guy that kind of follows you around and gives you certain things to do. I believe I have him turned off, which is why that's grayed out, but if you need him to come give you some advice, then be sure to click that and he will come to your assistance. The question mark is the help pages that are in game, so it initiates this drop down menu here. You can click through all these and it will, you know, show you different things. It's very summarized, so it might not have as much detail as you need, but it's certainly there for a little pinch if you need just a specific thing clarifying. Next up we have the spell browser. This lets you look at every single law of magic in the game, all the different spells, everything that they do, the overcast versions, literally everything about spells you could ever need to know. Again, this doesn't seem particularly useful to me unless you are deciding what lord you want to recruit with what law of magic. So say I want to recruit a mage. I have the choice of Death, Light, Nehekara or Shadows. So I click this and I can look at the different spell laws and see which one fits best for my playstyle and which one I want to get. Finally, we have the camera controls. I've never touched this in my entire life. I've got like 600 hours in this game. I've not really ever touched it. I just kind of leave them all on default and it works well enough for me. Next, in the top center, we have what is generally kind of the faction economic overview. So here we have our total money and we have our income per turn. If you hover over that, it gives you a brief breakdown. If you want more details, you click on this chest here and it shows you a summary as well as all your money coming from trade. And then if you really want all the details, you can go on this and it'll show you where it's coming from, the taxes, and then how much you are putting out. So you know how much upkeep and construction and this and that, as much as you could ever possibly want to need so that you could run your own accounting firm within Total War if that's what you so wish. Now, if your faction has specific resources, like I'm playing the Tomb Kings, they have Canopy Jars, this will also appear here. Other things that appear here are things like Infamy, Emperor's Favour for Marcus Wolfart, I can't remember if that's exactly what it's called, but that appears there. If you're playing the Vortex campaign, you will see how close you are to your rituals, that will also be at the top here. It just shows you your general progress. Because we're in Mortal Empires, we haven't really got much, but it gives you just a good idea of how close to finishing your objectives or how well you're doing at gathering certain resources is going. Finally, we have these small blue icons here. These just show you any faction-wide effects that are going on. So here we have 4 turns remaining on better trade and better trade producing buildings. Anything else that appears here, you can just hover over it, give it a look. When you get to the end game and you have a bazillion effects coming on at once, it can be a little overwhelming, but if you just hover over each one of them, give them a little read, you can get a decent idea of what's going on. On the top right here, we have the minimap, and if you press tab, we get what is basically the minimap zoomed out without the colours, but we can just see a much more zoomed out view of everything that's going on, all the provinces, how they're divided up. It's very, very useful for if you're thinking, okay, so I want to take the coast of Araby, what do I need to get? I need to get this and that, and then I want the Land of Assassins, so I need that island, and then these 2 places. It's very useful stuff like that, planning ahead. It's just a little bit unfortunate it doesn't show us the colours, but hey-ho, what can you do? In fact, I believe, there we are, if you tick these boxes, you can actually get the colours, so I stand corrected. But yes, you can show all the different things, their diplomatic status, the attitude towards you, their wealth, public order, growth, winter magic, climate sustainability, and then the different types of corruption. How fun. This scroll icon here will show you missions. There are a few types of missions in the game, I'll just briefly go over them now. You have character-specific missions for certain items, so if we go to Kalida, so as you can see here, she got the quest for the Venom Staff. When she gets to a certain level, the quest pops up. It normally has a few steps. It's normally things such as, kill a certain number of enemies, take some battle captives, take certain numbers of settlements, and when you complete that, it will unlock the quest battle, and then once you win that battle, it will reward you with a legendary item that is unique to that character, so that's always good. You should not prioritize these, but if you have them unlocked, it's a good idea just to go towards them because the items can be very, very powerful. So yes, pick them up as soon as you can. Chapter objectives are basically progression that you're going to complete over the course of the campaign anyway. So if we go here, we can see our different chapter objectives. So our first one was reach rank 30, and then, gain access to the resources, take a certain number of settlements, take certain settlements. They are just things that kind of progress your campaign and give you some rewards for moving on. Like, these aren't things that you need to keep track of. You will most likely complete them just by playing the game, so I won't get too wrapped up in chasing after them. Event missions can be unique from faction to faction. For the Dread Fleet, they get missions to declare war on certain factions, and it's not always worth doing when you get these ones. You should never feel pressured to do these, especially when they give you a time limit. You get worried thinking that you need to do it, but all that will happen if you don't do it is the mission will just disappear and you won't get the reward. But what you could do if you do complete the mission by declaring war on someone or doing whatever, you can put yourself in a worse position for the sake of getting a few thousand gold and maybe an item. So you do have to weigh up, can I do this anyway, and is it worth doing at all? And finally, we have story missions, which are generally reserved for the Vortex campaign. These are things that will progress you with the story of the campaign. So for the most part, for factions, it's just, performing the rituals, progressing, getting to the final battle, stuff like that. In the Mortal Empires, you don't really get much like this. So you can kind of just, do whatever you want. And I must state again, no missions are compulsory. If you see a mission come up, you do not need to do it. It is just something there for if you want to do it. It's kind of a thing to give you some direction if you need it. Like, sometimes when I'm playing the Mortal Empires campaign, I just kind of go off on my own tangents and don't really do anything useful. If I get one of these missions, it's useful to, say, oh, well, this is my new objective. This is what I want to work towards. It's good for something like that, but don't do it at the cost of everything else. This banner icon here, this shows all the events. And while they are broken down into many, many, many different categories, all that you really need to look at is world events and events specific to you. So these can be things like wars, buildings being built, character activities, army activities, a lord coming back from being wounded. It can be a massive number of things, so just give them a read, and most of them are pretty self-explanatory, to be honest with you. So that shield icon there, that is lords and heroes. So if we click on that, it shows us all the lords and heroes that we have in our faction. If we click on them, it zooms us over to them, and it works for lords and heroes, even when not embedded in an army. So if we go down here, we have a hero not in an army, we'll just see he's there. We see how much move range they've got, and this number here is how many units they have in their army. It's all very useful information. If you go to the bottom here, these ones that are greyed out are lords that are not currently leading an army, but are in your recruitment pool and have already been bought. So you don't need to pay to get them, you can just recruit them for the upkeep, as I showed earlier. This castle type looking icon over here, that shows all your provinces. When it has your faction banner over it, that means that you have complete ownership over it and you can do commandments. When you see this kind of broken wall castle looking thing, this means it's contested, so you don't own all of the settlements inside of it. They're either owned by just other factions, enemies, or they've been raised. So it's pretty self-explanatory once again. From here you can see each different province's income, their public order, while the public order changes by this little arrow here. You can also see from this tiny hammer icon if there are any buildings slots available, or if there's anything you can upgrade in that settlement. At the bottom here we can see other provinces, so these are just every single province that you know of in the entire game. It is a big old list of provinces, and I can't say I've ever really used it for anything useful, but you know, it's there if you want to have a look. And finally we have this weird half face icon at the top. This is our known factions, so it's separated by race, quite like in the diplomatic menu, and it shows us, you know, what treaties you have, what trade agreements, and general opinions of you from all the other factions. Again, separated into all their races, very nicely and neatly. It's basically something to have a look at without going into the diplomatic menu if you can't bother navigating it all, but personally, I just kind of like going into the menu because it's just a bit more clear. Finally, this large icon with your flag on it takes you to the kind of faction overview page. It puts you on this summary page here, and this shows you a lot of information kind of in a essentials only package. So the details here, we can see what our capital is, how many provinces and settlements we own, how much money we gain, and how much money we have. We can see any faction effects, mostly from our lord, but any, you know, events that have happened. Do you have any choices that you've made that affect your faction as a whole? You can see all our climate preferences, you know, suitable, unpleasant, uninhabitable. We can see our faction power, how many armies we have, how many heroes we have, our total hero capacity for each of our heroes. You can see all of our diplomatic treaties with, you know, every single faction that we have treaties with, so we can see all our trade agreements, all our military alliances, all our wars, everything. If we go over to records, again, it's quite like what I showed you when I clicked on Cleda, and it showed us all of, you know, the stuff that she's been doing. If we just select all of these, it will show us every single thing that has happened in the entire game to do with us, and it's kind of a cool way to just see, you know, where we started as. So I'm the brown one that you see here, and you can see how I expanded, how I got pushed back. It's very interesting to have a look at, but there's not really any use for it other than if you just want to have a look and it's interesting to you. Finally, we have a look at statistics. Again, this is one of those things that's only really there for an interesting read. It shows you, you know, the number of turns, stuff about factions and income and settlements and expenditure and armies and everything. It shows you your full statistics for the entire game, how many wins, how many losses, everything you could ever want to know. But again, it's only really there for fun rather than anything particularly useful. Finally, our last part of the screen is the bottom right here, and this has quite a number of things kind of tacked onto it, and it can be even more depending on what faction you're playing as. This kind of medal-shaped icon here that might look a little bit different depending on what faction you're playing, these are your objectives. So clicking on this, we can see our chapter objectives, our victory conditions for both a long and a short campaign. We can also see how close we are to achieving each of these via the ticks here, and how many of them we have completed. It's very useful for if you want something to do to get you the win, which is what I've kind of been doing with my campaigns. I just see, okay, what's a short victory condition? How can I go about, you know, aiming towards this? And it kind of gives me a good direction to go in my campaign rather than just, you know, kind of being a bit more reactive. It allows you to be a bit more active in what you are choosing to do. The scroll is for the diplomatic menu. I have an entire video going over this menu by itself, so I'll again put that in the card. Be sure to watch that if you want to know more about this, because it can be very complicated, but it's also very, very useful to know about and get the most out of it in your campaigns. Now this quill icon here, again, can look quite different depending on what faction you're playing as, but more often than not, it's a kind of quill shape and then something else, maybe a sword or a shield or whatever. But this is basically the research for the faction, and while it is different for every single faction in the game, and I go over them in my campaign guides, they are pretty much the same. It's just, you know, improvements for certain units, upkeep reductions, income improvements for certain buildings and building types, growth, corruption, all the usual stuff, just pretty much everything you can think of that would improve your faction. There is more than likely a research option for it. Some guys have unique ones, such as, you know, getting more lords like the Tomb Kings or the Vampire Coast, but for the most part it's just general improvements to the faction. It's worth noting, by the way, that research doesn't cost anything for the most part. Some factions have research plans that do cost things and do need certain buildings, but for the most part it's just kind of a free thing to let tick over and get good improvements for your faction over time. Now, if your faction is in Game 2, as in Warhammer 2, then they have access to rights. Pretty much all of them do, I think, all of the ones that are in Game 2. So these are basically normally 4 abilities that you get. Now these things cost resources, either gold or a unique faction resource, and they just get you some improvements for your faction, be it, sandstorms and immunity to attrition, income per turn, growth. It can get you a wide variety of things, and again, I go over this in every single faction guide that I make on the Warhammer 2 races. I go over the rights and what each of them does, so if you want to know more about that, get in that corner, my man, because I have linked it way too many times now for you to know. Finally, the largest round icon is the end turn button, and it can be covered up by alerts. So if I click on this, it will take me to the alert and I can get rid of it this way. So I can, click and spend the skill points. Alternatively, I can click this button here, which will skip the current notification and, just take me to the end of them so that I can, move on and end my turn. Alternatively, what you can do if you want to zip around all the notifications, you can click this arrow at the bottom here and it will send you through everything that you need to do or everything that the game wants you to do before you can end your turn. What you can do, if you are sick of all these notifications clogging up your screen, you can click this tiny little cog button here and you can decide what gives you notifications. So if you, you don't care about research, you've researched everything that you want, you don't care, you just take that off and then it won't tell you to set a new research project. As soon as it's finished one, it'll just stop and it won't do anything. But you can basically turn that off and on for pretty much everything. I generally have left it as it is because I just like to know what's going on. So, if I'm running low on funds or if I've got research available, even if there's nothing I want to research, I'll just stick it on something just to have whatever bonus it's getting me on in the background. I'm getting close to the end. I do promise you, I'm well aware that this is extremely long, but I promise you we're almost there. I'm just going to quickly go over the lords and heroes and what moving them around does and how it all works. So depending on what hero you use and what you send them against, either a settlement or an army, it can have some different effects. And again, some factions have unique things that they can do, but for the most part, I'm just going to go over the most common ones that you will see. So assassinate is used to assassinate heroes of any other race. You don't have to be at war with them, but if you do it with someone you're not at war with, they won't exactly like you for it. But yes, when you assassinate, you can either get a wound, which is a success, or you can get a critical success, which will assassinate the hero and mean that they do not come back. If they wound, they'll just come back after a few turns, but if it is a critical success, then they are dead, they're not coming back. It can be used against heroes that are either in an army or out of one, so if you just see a hero wandering around, you can assassinate it. Likewise, if an enemy army is full of hero spam, you can assassinate some of the heroes in there. Assaulting garrisons will damage units in the garrison, so if you attack a settlement, you can see the garrison here. If I attacked it with my assassin over here, it would damage the garrison, and those units would take some damage and be a bit easier to kill. It's a good one for using just before you're about to besiege the settlement, because if you damage the garrison and then take a few turns to get over there, the units will just, regenerate by the time you're there. It's worth noting, by the way, when I said assassinations, all heroes can wound, but only assassins can assassinate and completely kill. So if you have a mage going around, he can wound any enemy hero that he sees, but only heroes that have the assassinate skill can completely kill a unit. If you ever want to check what a hero can do, by the way, just click on one outside of an army and look to the left here and you can see a breakdown of everything that they can do. You can also damage walls, and what this will basically do is make the walls damaged. So when you get into the battle on the map, you'll see that some of the wall is a bit damaged. It might even have a hole in it that you can walk your units through. It is very, very, very useful when you are playing as a faction that really struggles with fighting against walls. I'd recommend doing this quite a bit and spamming it so that the walls are extremely damaged so you can just tear them straight down and get right in there. You can block enemy armies. This just restricts their movement range. It's pretty basic. It's only usable on enemy armies. Hinder replenishment, again, just slows down the replenishment of the enemy units. Still tech will increase your research speed for a little while and can only be used on an enemy settlement. You can embed your heroes in armies to have them fight for you. This can increase the move range of the army, increase the replenishment, increase the chance of getting post-battle loot, and train the units by a certain amount of XP per turn. So if you right-click on a settlement that you don't own, it will ask you if you want to declare war on that faction if you haven't already. If you have declared war on that faction, it will take you to this menu, where it will give you several options. It will ask you if you want to fight the battle manually, and what that basically does, it takes you to the real-time strategy of Total War. You'll have to fight whatever the army is or whatever the settlement is with your units. You can auto-resolve it, which will let the computer do it. This generally results in more casualties, but it is faster and it is easier. If you choose to break siege, this will just move you away, and you won't attack the settlement. If you choose to encircle, this will kind of starve out the settlement and wait for them to take attrition. You can see by the skull and the flag icons here, After 6 turns, they will start taking severe amounts of attrition, and after 12 turns, they will completely surrender and you'll just take the settlement without even having to fight. This button here allows you to scout the terrain and see what kind of, surface you're going to be fighting the battle on. You're obviously the yellow, the enemy is the red. This button here will quick save, and what this will allow you to do is, if the battle doesn't go in your favour, you can just load up the save and, choose to not attack or choose to encircle or whatever. And then, of course, the question mark just opens up the help pages. So after a settlement battle, you will be presented with a number of options. Of course, these can vary depending on the faction, but for the most part, they are pretty much going to be one of these 3 or 4. So Occupy just takes a settlement. It does harm the public order, but it's going to go away after a couple of turns. You'll have -10 for 1 turn, and then -5 decaying by 1 per turn for the next 5 turns, obviously. You can sack the settlement, which will get you a bit of money and some replenishment, and it will give you a -10 to public order decaying, so if you have a settlement in this province, it might not be the wisest decision to do this. You can also just raise the settlement to the ground, which will make a little bit of provincial instability, a -2 that will decay, and what this will do, it will just burn the settlement to the ground. There won't be anything left, and anyone can just come in and colonize this or search the ruins. Raising will also give you a little bit of money, and that's pretty much it. There's also an option that some factions get, which is loot and occupy. What this will do, this will kind of sack and occupy. You won't get as much money as sacking, and the public order will be worse than occupying. So what I prefer to do is just sack and then occupy, because if you have the move range available, you can do both in the same turn anyway. Now, if it is the last settlement of this entire faction, so say that, these guys, they didn't have another settlement anywhere else on the entire map, what you could choose to do is vassalize them. This will let them keep the settlement, but they will become your vassal. They will give you some certain amount of money per turn, but you'll have to protect them. And I have never really done this. I'd rather have the settlement, me personally, unless you're playing as a faction, like the Chaos Warriors or something, where, you want them to fight for you and you want them to give you money. For the most part, I just get rid of the faction and take the settlement for myself. If a dead faction once lived there, so say, one of my fellow pirates, say the Drowned, had been in this settlement, then I could reawaken them and they would come back and they would still be my vassal, but they would be much more friendly with me. We'd do lots of trade, we'd be best friends, it'd be amazing. Now, when you attack a normal army, the only difference between that and an unwalled settlement is that you don't have the encircle option. You can either manually fight the battle, or to resolve it, or retreat. And you get to still, scout it, quick save, anything that you want. The only difference is you can't encircle, because obviously it's an army, that doesn't really work. Post-battle, you get different options, because you're not taking a settlement, you've just taken out an army. You can either ransom the enemy for some money, depending on your faction, this can give you a debuff to public order, or maybe to the replenishment of your troops, because I'm not very happy with that. Most factions can kill the captives, which gets them 100 XP for all units in the army. These guys can't specifically do it, but just trust me, most factions can. And I would personally never recommend doing this. It's not really ever worth it. The XP isn't very significant. I'd only do it if you took literally no casualties the entire battle, and you're just trying to level up the army, because there's not really any point to doing it. Final option that you get is enslavement or assimilate or whatever, and this basically just gets you some replenishment for your army. I almost always go for this one, or ransom, because there's not really any point to doing, to getting them for XP. It's just pointless. Finally, when you attack a walled settlement, you get these 2 options here that allow you to build siege engines. You can either build a battering ram or towers. I personally always go for towers, because battering rams just seem to be shot out in the open, and they're only there to get large units through the gate, but if you have large units, just get them to attack the gate. They do basically the same job. Just go for towers every single time, personally. Of course, you just have the exact same options as you would, apart from Encircle as being replaced with Continue Siege. There's no difference, they just last a little bit longer before they start taking attrition and surrender. One last thing to remember is that if you are encircling or besieging, it allows enemy to attack you whilst you're stationary, either from a separate army, or if there is an army or just the garrison inside of the settlement, they can choose to come out and attack you on the open field. This can either be beneficial or not very good. If they bring an army to flank you and then the garrison attacks you, you can really get screwed over. So it's best to keep your wits about you and not let yourself get surrounded. But yes, I believe that is everything that I can possibly think of to do with the entire UI and controls for the campaign map. I really hope you found this useful. This is aimed at, people looking to pick up the game, people that have only just picked up the game. I hope it helps you out, and I really hope you enjoyed this video, because it took me a very long time to record this. If you did like this video, then do be sure to leave it a like, leave a comment with anything that I missed. I really tried my best to get every single thing, so if I missed something, please let me know down below. I'll push your comment to the top, and I'll make sure that people see it so that we didn't miss anything. If you didn't like this video, if it was not very useful, if you didn't like it, then be sure to give it a dislike. I would appreciate that very much. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. If you did enjoy this video, then be sure to subscribe, hit that notification bell so you never miss a video. Because I know that some people, especially when I start streams, they say, "Oh, I didn't even know you were streaming. I didn't get the notification from YouTube." Hit that bell. It just increases your chances of seeing that I've uploaded or I've started streaming something. But for now, I was COLONELDAMNEDERS, and I'll see you next turn.